The music academy was buzzing with activity that morning. Students of all ages hurried through the grand hall, carrying sheet music, tuning their instruments, or rehearsing quietly in the corners. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and piano polish, mingled with the faint scent of old books stacked in the library. At the center of this organized chaos, the director, a man known for his sharp eyes and sharper words, was already seated behind a large desk. He scanned the list of names with his usual impatience, tapping a pen on the table. Waiting for the auditions to begin, he had seen hundreds of students in his life. Each one confident in their talent, or at least confident enough to pretend they were. He prided himself on being able to tell in a few minutes whether someone had real potential, or was just chasing a dream that would never come true. To him, music was not just an art. It was a test of discipline, focus, and character. The first few students arrived dressed neatly in formal clothes. They carried themselves with pride, some with a hint of nervousness. Each played their piece with varying degrees of skill, and the director nodded or frowned accordingly. Some were good, a few were excellent, but none truly surprised him. He had grown accustomed to seeing talent that followed a pattern: skillful hands, polished performance, confident posture. Then, almost unnoticed, a boy entered the room. He was quiet, dressed in simple, slightly worn clothes. His shoes had scuffs, his shirt was clean but plain, and his hair was a little messy, as if he had run all the way there. He carried a small notebook under his arm, and when he approached the desk, he did so with a polite nod. The director barely looked up. His eyes flickered over the boy, taking in his small frame and humble appearance. He suppressed a smirk. "And you are?" he asked, his voice edged with skepticism. The boy replied softly, giving his name. There was no hesitation, no false confidence, just quiet politeness. The director leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You want to audition for the piano?" he asked, his tone almost mocking. The boy nodded. "Yes, sir." The director glanced around the room, making eye contact with the other staff members, silently asking them to share in his amusement. Some tried to hide their smiles. Others looked uneasy. It wasn't often that the director was openly cruel, but he had a reputation for testing students' humility. Today it seemed he would do it in front of everyone. "Very well," he said slowly, the words dripping with skepticism. "Sit at the piano, then. Let's see what you have." The boy approached the grand piano at the center of the room. The keys gleamed under the bright lights, polished to a reflective shine. He paused for a moment, placing his fingers lightly on the keys, closing his eyes briefly as if to gather strength. The director leaned forward slightly. Curiosity mixed with doubt. A few other students whispered to each other, trying not to laugh. "He doesn't even look like he knows how to play," one muttered. The boy ignored them, taking a deep breath. He adjusted the stool slightly and straightened his back, positioning his hands carefully. Every small motion showed respect for the instrument. Even if he did not look like a polished, accomplished performer, the director's smirk grew. He had seen many students try and fail spectacularly. Perhaps this one would be no different. "Let's begin," he said, almost impatiently. "Play something of your choice." The boy nodded and began. At first, the notes were simple, almost tentative. They were soft, quiet, as if he were feeling out the keys, testing the piano's voice. The director frowned slightly. "Not much," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. But then something changed. The boy's fingers started to move with more confidence. The melody flowed, gentle but precise. Each note seemed to tell a story that reached beyond the walls of the room and touched something deeper in the heart of anyone listening. There was a rhythm and emotion that could not be taught, a subtle intensity that spoke of hours of practice and quiet determination. The director blinked, his eyes narrowing. He leaned closer, unable to hide the flicker of surprise on his face. The boy's performance was growing richer, fuller, and more expressive with each measure. It was clear now that this was not a child who had stumbled into the wrong room. This was a boy with a gift, a talent that had been nurtured silently, away from the public eye, perhaps without recognition, but with a dedication that was undeniable. Some staff members shifted in their seats. A few exchanged looks of disbelief. Even the other students stopped whispering, caught in the spell of the music. There was no arrogance in the boy's playing, no attempt to impress. Each note came from genuine skill and emotion, a pure reflection of his inner world. The director's smirk faded completely, replaced by a tense line of concentration. He had never seen a student quiet a room like this, nor one who could command attention without speaking a word. A small bead of sweat appeared on his temple, not from the heat of the room, but from the unexpected realization that he had judged too soon. As the piece drew to a close, the last notes lingered in the air, gentle echoes that seemed to hold the entire room in a brief suspension of time. For a few seconds there was complete silence. The director stared at the boy, unsure whether to speak. The boy, for his part, remained calm, waiting politely, his hands resting lightly on the keys. There was no boastfulness, no demand for recognition, just quiet, respectful patience. Then slowly, applause began. One of the staff members clapped lightly, then another joined in. Soon the room was filled with genuine, heartfelt clapping. The boy's eyes met the director's for the first time, and there was no triumph in his gaze, only a calm awareness of what he had done. The director cleared his throat, standing up. For a moment, he did not speak, his pride and authority shaken by what he had witnessed. I did not expect that, he finally admitted, his voice steady but carrying a note of humility. Well done? The boy nodded politely. Thank you, sir. Though the audition had just begun, something had already changed. The director, once confident that he could predict talent at a glance, now realized that he had been wrong. He had assumed he knew everything about judging potential. But this quiet boy had proven that true talent cannot be measured by appearance. Confidence or background. In that moment, the academy itself seemed to acknowledge the lesson. The polished floors reflected more than light, they reflected a truth that was often overlooked. Greatness could come from anywhere, and it sometimes arrived quietly, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The boy packed up his notebook, adjusted his clothes, and left the piano with a calm smile. Behind him, the room buzzed with whispers of astonishment and admiration. The director remained seated, processing the unexpected lesson, his earlier doubts replaced by a mixture of respect and reflection. That day the boy did more than play music. He had reminded everyone present of something far more important, that talent is not always loud, and brilliance does not need an introduction. Sometimes it quietly waits, ready to surprise the world when it is least expected. And in that quiet, simple way, the boy had captured the hearts of everyone in the room, even the one who had doubted him most. The moment the boy walked away from the piano, the room seemed to buzz with a strange energy. The applause had faded, but the whispers lingered. Everyone in the hall was talking quietly, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Some could not hide their astonishment, while others quietly nodded, as if they had suspected this boy might be special all along. But there was one person whose reaction was different. Far more complicated. The director, he sat at his desk, staring at the polished wood, as if the piano itself had delivered a challenge he hadn't expected. Pride, irritation, and surprise battled in his mind. He was used to being the judge, the authority, the one who decided who had potential and who didn't. Yet today, a quiet boy had disrupted that certainty with nothing but skill and sincerity. The director rubbed his temples and sighed. He had been known for his sharp tongue, his ability to read people in an instant, and his strict rules about talent and presentation. He often made students uncomfortable on purpose, testing their character as much as their skill. But this boy had passed the test without even realizing there was one. He had ignored the mockery, the doubts, and the low expectations, and had simply played. Later, when the other students filed out for a break, many glanced at the director. Some wanted to congratulate the boy. Others were curious about his background. Few dared to approach him directly. The boy had already returned to a quiet corner of the room, opening his small notebook. He didn't seem to notice the attention, and he certainly didn't look for praise. He only seemed focused, almost lost in thought, reviewing music notes he had written himself. The director's eyes followed him. There was a tightness around his jaw that betrayed his discomfort. He had been ready to dismiss the boy as insignificant, and now he was forced to reconsider. He realized that he had underestimated something he often overlooked: determination. Talent alone was impressive, but the combination of skill and unwavering dedication was extraordinary. Curiosity overcame him. He stood up and walked over, his steps deliberate. The boy looked up when he approached, but there was no hint of fear or arrogance in his expression. He simply nodded politely, as though the director were just another adult in the room. "Tell me," the director began carefully, "how long have you been playing?" The boy looked down at his notebook for a moment before answering. "Since I can remember, sir. I play every day, sometimes for hours. I learn from recordings, from listening to others, from books. Mostly I play on my own." The director raised his eyebrows. "On your own?" he asked, his voice softer now, less mocking and more curious. The boy nodded. "Yes, my family can't afford lessons, but I love playing. I practice whenever I can. I make mistakes, I try again, and slowly I get better." There was a silence between them. The director had spent decades surrounded by students who came with teachers, with recommendations, with every advantage he valued. This boy had none of that. Nothing but his love for music, and a determination that refused to be ignored. "You could have been afraid," the director said finally. "Afraid that I would laugh or that others would mock you?" Most children would have run away. The boy shook his head gently. "I wasn't afraid. I just wanted to play. I wanted to share what I can do. I didn't think about what anyone would say." The director looked at him, and for the first time in years, he felt a strange sense of humility. Here was someone who had no desire to impress, no desire to compete, yet had done something remarkable. He had reminded the director of why music mattered in the first place. It wasn't about appearances or reputation. It was about expression, connection, and passion, but the director was not yet ready to admit how deeply the boy's performance had affected him. Instead, he made a small, cautious remark. "You have talent, yes, but talent alone isn't enough. You will need guidance, discipline, and opportunity to reach your full potential." The boy's eyes lit up slightly, but he remained calm. "I will work hard, sir. I will do whatever it takes." That statement, simple and sincere, struck the director in a way that words rarely did. He remembered his own beginnings, the long hours of practice, the times when no one believed in him. He had learned to push through doubts, to turn criticism into fuel. And now, in front of him, stood someone who had the same fire, someone who didn't need encouragement to work, only a chance to grow. Meanwhile, other students had begun to gather around. Some were curious about the boy, some were skeptical, and some were openly impressed. One of the older students, who had performed just before the boy, approached cautiously. You played beautifully," he said. "I didn't expect that." The boy smiled softly. "Thank you. I'm just happy to play." The older student shook his head in disbelief. "You make it sound so simple. Most of us practice for years with teachers, and still, it's not like that." The boy shrugged. "I just keep trying. Every mistake is a lesson. Every note is a chance to learn." The director watched silently, absorbing every word. He realized that in his years of judging talent, he had often overlooked this quality. Confidence was easy to spot, and skill was measurable. But persistence, humility, and love for the craft, that was rare, and perhaps more important than anything else. After a few moments, the director cleared his throat and addressed the room. "I want everyone to hear something," he said. "Talent can come in unexpected forms. Sometimes it is quiet, humble, and unnoticed. But it is no less powerful." A hush fell over the students as the boy returned to his corner, sitting quietly, unaware of the attention he had drawn. He picked up his notebook again, ready to practice, ready to play, as if nothing had happened. Yet everyone in the room had been touched by his performance, and by the quiet dignity with which he carried himself. As the day continued, the boy had to audition for several other teachers. Each time, the story repeated itself. Skepticism, surprise, and finally, respect. The boy played without pretense, without arrogance, and each time, His music spoke louder than any words could dot by the end of the morning. The director was exhausted, but not from the long hours of judging. He was exhausted from confronting his own assumptions. He had come in expecting to see a child he could dismiss, someone who would fail and prove him right. Instead, he had met a young musician who had challenged his perceptions, who had reminded him why he loved music in the first place. He called a brief meeting with the staff before lunch. "This boy," he said, "is extraordinary, not only for his skill, but for his character. We cannot ignore this. We need to find a way to support him, to give him the guidance he deserves." The staff nodded, some still looking in awe at the boy in the practice room. They had all seen the quiet power of his playing, and none of them would forget it. Meanwhile, the boy was unaware of the meeting. He was focused, sitting at the piano, scribbling notes in his notebook, thinking about the music he wanted to play next. To him, it was not about recognition or about approval. It was about learning, about expressing himself, and about continuing to grow. And in that simple, natural way, the boy continued to inspire everyone around him. Not through words, not through boasting, but through persistence, humility, and the quiet power of music. By the time lunch arrived, the director had made a decision. He would personally mentor the boy, guide him, and ensure that his talent was nurtured. But more than that, he would remember the lesson he had learned that day: never underestimate someone because of their appearance, their background, or their quiet demeanor. True talent often arrives softly, but it leaves a mark that cannot be ignored. That afternoon, as the boy returned to the piano for another practice session, the director watched from a distance. There was no smirk, no sarcasm, no doubt. Only respect and a recognition that something rare and wonderful was unfolding right in front of him. The boy's journey was just beginning. He did not yet know how far he could go or what opportunities lay ahead. But one thing was certain: his music had already spoken, and it had changed the hearts of everyone who heard it, the director included. And so, in the quiet, bustling halls of the music academy, the boy continued to play, unaware that he was also teaching a lesson about patience, humility, and the unexpected power of talent to everyone around him. After the morning auditions, the boy's reputation had quietly spread through the academy. Students whispered about him in hallways. Teachers discussed his skill in staff rooms, and even the janitors paused to watch him practice. Yet, despite all the attention, he carried himself with calmness, as if none of it mattered. He wasn't seeking fame or approval. Music, to him, was something personal, a language through which he could express feelings that words could not reach. The director, still processing the morning, decided it was time for a more formal evaluation. He wanted to see how the boy would perform under pressure. Up until now, the auditions had been straightforward, the boy playing pieces he knew well. This time, the director would challenge him, testing not just skill, but adaptability and creativity. He called the boy into the main hall, where a grand piano waited under bright lights. The director stood nearby, arms crossed, trying to maintain an air of authority, though he secretly felt nervous. He had not anticipated being challenged so completely by a single student. Today, the director began, "I want you to play something different. Choose a piece you do not know well, something challenging. You will have 10 minutes to prepare. Then you will perform it in front of the teachers and students. Are you ready?" The boy nodded quietly. "Yes, sir." A murmur spread through the room. 10 minutes was hardly any time for preparation, especially for a complex piece of music. Some students whispered doubts about him. Could he really adapt that quickly? Others, remembering his performance from the morning, simply watched. Curious and anxious to see what would happen, the boy approached the piano. He opened the music book the director handed him and scanned the notes carefully. His fingers traced the lines as he read, absorbing the rhythm and the flow. Even though it was unfamiliar, he didn't panic. His calm demeanor and focus drew the attention of everyone in the room. There was no hesitance, no self-doubt. He was simply ready to learn and perform. The 10 minutes passed quickly. Some students were quietly judging him, thinking they would have crumbled under the pressure. Teachers whispered to each other, watching the boy as he practiced with intense concentration. His fingers moved with precision, slowly mastering the unfamiliar piece. as though the piano itself was listening and guiding him. When the time came to perform, the hall fell silent. The boy took his place at the piano, his hands hovering over the keys for a moment. He closed his eyes briefly, taking a deep breath, and then began. The first notes were cautious but clear, each one deliberate. Slowly, confidence grew, and the music became fluid, expressive, and full of emotion. The melody rose and fell with unexpected power, capturing everyone's attention. Teachers leaned forward in surprise, some even forgetting to breathe as the boy navigated the difficult passages with ease. The director, who had expected to witness hesitation or mistakes, was stunned. He watched as the boy's fingers danced over the keys, transforming a challenging piece into a living story. Each note seemed to speak not just of technical skill, but of understanding and feeling. It was as if the boy's soul had merged with the piano, and the room had become a world where only music existed. Some students, previously doubtful, whispered to each other in awe. "How is he doing that?" One asked quietly. "I've practiced for months and I couldn't even play the first few bars like that." The boy, unaware of the whispers, continued playing. There was no rush, no showmanship, only purity of expression. His eyes occasionally flicked toward the director, but not with defiance or fear. It was simply acknowledgement, a connection that said, "I am here, doing my best, and nothing else matters." The director felt a mix of emotions, astonishment, admiration, and a pang of humility. He had underestimated the boy, and now he realized just how wrong he had been. The boy's talent was undeniable, but what made it extraordinary was his composure under pressure, his ability to adapt, and his quiet determination. This was not just skill. It was mastery born from patience and perseverance. As the final notes echoed through the hall, there was a moment of silence. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, savoring the last vibrations of the music. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder and more enthusiastic. Students cheered, teachers clapped, and even the janitors and staff, who had been observing, stopped to express their admiration. The boy looked up from the piano with a humble smile, acknowledging the applause but not seeking it. He stood and bowed slightly, then stepped away from the instrument. The room was still buzzing with excitement and disbelief. He had just performed a piece he barely knew 10 minutes earlier, and he had done it flawlessly. With grace and emotion that touched everyone, the director approached him, this time with a different expression. The arrogance and mockery of the morning were gone, replaced by respect and genuine curiosity. "I must admit," he said, his voice calmer than before, "you have exceeded my expectations once again." That was remarkable. The boy nodded politely. "Thank you, sir. I tried my best." The director paused, studying the boy carefully. "Tell me, do you understand what you just did?" The boy thought for a moment. "I played the music as I felt it, sir. I tried to listen to the notes and understand the story behind them. I don't think about being the best. I just try to play as truthfully as I can." The director's eyebrows lifted. "Truthfully, that's an interesting way to describe it. Most students think about impressing others, about grades, about recognition. You focus only on the music itself." The boy nodded. "Yes, sir. Music is not about showing off. It is about feeling it, understanding it, and sharing it. That is why I play." The director was silent for a moment, reflecting on those words. He realized that he had spent much of his career looking for talent in all the wrong ways. Confidence, appearances, and technique were important, yes, but the heart behind the music was what truly mattered. This boy had reminded him of that truth in the most powerful way possible. As the room settled, the other students began to approach the boy. Some wanted to ask questions about his practice methods. Others simply wanted to congratulate him. The boy answered each question with patience, never showing arrogance or annoyance. His humility only increased the respect others felt for him. Even some of the skeptical students were moved. They had assumed he would fail under pressure, but he had not only succeeded, he had excelled. It was a lesson in perseverance and quiet confidence that many of them would not forget later. When the hall had emptied, the director asked the boy to stay behind. "I want to speak with you privately," he said. They walked to a small office at the back of the academy. The director closed the door and gestured for the boy to sit. "You have shown me something today," the director began, "something I have not seen in a long time. Not just skill, but understanding, patience, and composure. Most importantly, you have reminded me why music matters. I am impressed, and I want to help you continue growing." The boy listened quietly, nodding. "I would be grateful for that, sir," he said softly. The director leaned back in his chair, thinking. "I will arrange for you to have proper guidance, access to materials, and opportunities to perform. You have the talent, but now it is time to nurture it. And I must admit, I have learned from you as well. You have shown me that judgment should never be made too quickly, and that true talent often comes quietly, waiting for a chance to be seen." The boy smiled. "I will do my best, sir. I promise I will work hard and make the most of every opportunity." As he left the office, the boy felt a mixture of excitement and determination. This was the moment he had been waiting for, not for recognition, but for the chance to grow, to learn, and to continue expressing himself through music. The academy, once a place of nerves and doubt, now felt like a space of possibility, a place where he could truly belong. The director watched him go, a quiet smile on his face. He had expected a challenge that would test the boy, but instead the boy had challenged him, his assumptions, his judgments, and his understanding of what it meant to have true talent. That evening, the director sat alone in his office, replaying the day in his mind. He had witnessed something rare, something inspiring, and he knew it would stay with him forever. Talent, he realized, was not always obvious. It could arrive quietly, humbly, and still leave an unforgettable mark. And so the boy's journey continued. Each note he played, each challenge he faced, was shaping him into not just a skilled pianist, but a musician who understood the true power of music, the ability to touch hearts, change minds, and inspire those who had the privilege to listen. The academy had changed that day, though no one could fully explain how. It was not just the boy who had learned lessons, but everyone who heard him, including the director. In that small hall, with a piano and a boy who refused to give up, the true meaning of music had been revealed once more. The next morning, the boy arrived at the academy earlier than usual. The hallways were quiet, with only the sound of footsteps echoing against the polished floors. It was a crisp morning, and the sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the dust particles floating gently in the air. The boy carried his notebook and a small bag of personal sheet music. He moved with calm determination, as though he belonged here, even though he had only recently started to make his presence known. The director was already in the main hall, waiting for the day's sessions to begin. He had spent the previous evening replaying the boy's performances in his mind. He could not shake the image of the boy at the piano, playing unfamiliar music flawlessly, yet with such humility and expression. Something about that had unsettled him, challenged his assumptions, and left him both impressed and introspective. As the boy entered, the director's eyes followed him. This time there was no mockery, no sarcasm, only curiosity and anticipation. He wanted to see how the boy would handle a new challenge, one that would test more than just skill. It would test courage, focus, and the boy's ability to adapt under scrutiny. "Good morning," the director said, his tone more measured than before. "Today we will see not just how well you play, but how you respond to guidance and expectation. Are you ready for something different?" The boy nodded politely. "Yes, sir. I am ready." The director gestured toward the grand piano at the center of the hall. "I want you to perform a piece I have chosen for you. You have never played it before. You may study it for 15 minutes, and then you will play it for all the teachers present." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. 15 minutes was a short time to prepare for a completely new composition. Some of the students exchanged nervous glances, wondering if the boy could possibly succeed. But those who had heard him play the previous day waited in quiet anticipation. Knowing that this boy often exceeded every expectation, the boy approached the piano and opened the music book. His eyes scanned the unfamiliar notes, tracing the lines carefully. He did not frown, nor did he hesitate. His fingers hovered over the keys as he studied the rhythm, the dynamics, and the phrasing. Every movement was precise, thoughtful, and patient. He was not rushing. He was learning. As the minutes ticked by, the other students watched in silence. Some tried to imagine how they would cope under such pressure, but they couldn't. This boy's calmness was almost unsettling. It was not fearlessness born of arrogance. It was a quiet confidence, born from a deep love for music and countless hours of practice in solitude. Finally, the director gestured for him to begin. "Play when you are ready," he said. The boy positioned himself at the piano, taking a deep breath. His hands rested lightly on the keys before moving into the first few measures. At first, the notes were careful, deliberate, as if he was testing the waters. But soon the melody began to flow. Each note was connected to the next, forming a seamless, expressive line. The music filled the room with emotion, drawing every listener into its story. Teachers and staff, who had seen hundreds of students perform over the years, were stunned. The boy's performance was not merely accurate. It was alive. He was interpreting the music with sensitivity, intelligence, and feeling. Every crescendo, every pause, every subtle shift in tempo communicated understanding and emotion far beyond his years. The director's initial skepticism faded completely. He could not look away. His fingers twitched slightly, betraying his tension, his astonishment. He had intended to challenge the boy, but instead, he was being challenged himself, his assumptions, his judgment, and his understanding of what true talent meant. Some students had begun to whisper quietly. "How does he do that?" one asked. "I've practiced for months, and I still can't read a piece like that in 15 minutes. The boy continued without noticing. He was fully absorbed in the music, each note flowing naturally from his fingers. There was no effort to impress, no attempt to show off, only a sincere desire to express the music faithfully. It was as if he were speaking through the piano, telling a story that everyone could feel, but few could fully understand. The director's mind raced. He had seen many talented students, some technically perfect, others charismatic performers, but few had ever moved him the way this boy was doing now. He realized, with a mixture of awe and humility, that he had underestimated him not only in skill but in character. This boy had patience, focus, and emotional intelligence that could not be taught in a classroom. As the piece neared its end, the boy's fingers danced over the final measures with elegance and precision. The last notes hung in the air, lingering like a soft echo, waiting to be absorbed by the room. Silence fell. No one dared to breathe for a moment, as if breaking the quiet would shatter the spell. Then, slowly, applause began. One teacher clapped, then another. The sound grew, filling the hall, spreading from the front row to the back. Students joined in, some cheering, some wiping away quiet tears of admiration. Even the director, who prided himself on his composure, could not hide his astonishment. He had been wrong in every expectation he had set for the boy. The boy lowered his hands from the keys and gave a small, polite bow. He did not smile widely, nor did he revel in the praise. He simply acknowledged it with quiet grace, as though the act of playing itself was reward enough. The director stepped forward. I am truly impressed," he said, his voice steady but full of sincerity. "Your performance today has shown courage, skill, and understanding. You have not only played beautifully but have also taught us all a lesson about patience, humility, and dedication." The boy nodded. "Thank you, sir. I only try to play as best as I can." There was a pause. The director realized that the lesson was not just for him, but for everyone in the room. Talent was not about appearances, about showing off, or about immediate recognition. True talent could be quiet, patient, and persistent, and when it revealed itself, it could leave a lasting impression. Later, when the hall was empty, the director called the boy aside. He wanted to speak privately. "I want you to understand something important," he said. "Many students come here with confidence, with recommendations, with support, but they often lack the focus and humility that you show. What you have is rare. Do not lose it, no matter what happens in the future. The boy listened attentively. I understand, sir. I will continue to work hard and play honestly. The director nodded. He felt a deep sense of respect for the boy, mixed with humility. For the first time in years, he realized that he had been judging too quickly, that he had allowed preconceptions to cloud his ability to see true potential. The boy had reminded him of something essential. Music is not just about technique or recognition, it is about connection, emotion, and persistence. Over the next few days, the boy's reputation at the academy grew. Teachers recommended him for advanced sessions, students sought advice, and even the other staff members began to look at him differently. Yet the boy remained unchanged. He practiced quietly, focused on improving his skill, learning from mistakes, and exploring new pieces. One afternoon, the director observed him from a distance. The boy was playing a particularly difficult composition, his fingers moving with confidence, his expression calm yet concentrated. The music was complex, yet he handled it with ease as though he had been born to play it. The director felt a swell of pride mixed with awe. He realized that this boy was not just a student, he was a reminder of why he had chosen this profession, why he had devoted his life to nurturing talent. The director approached him quietly. You are progressing faster than I expected, he said. Your dedication and focus are remarkable. Continue like this and you will go far. The boy looked up briefly. Thank you, sir. I will keep trying my best. That evening, the director reflected on everything that had happened. The boy had arrived quietly, dressed modestly, with nothing to boast about except his skill and dedication. He had faced skepticism, mockery, and challenge, yet he had remained calm, focused, and sincere. He had not only impressed everyone with his playing, but he had also taught a lesson about patience, humility, and the importance of judging people by their abilities, not appearances. The academy itself seemed transformed. Students had seen what determination and talent could achieve, teachers had witnessed the power of dedication, and the director had learned a personal lesson in humility and understanding. All of this had been made possible by a single boy, whose love for music was so pure that it could not be ignored. As the boy left the hall that day, carrying his notebook and sheet music, the director watched him go with a quiet smile. The boy's journey was far from over, but one thing was certain. He had already made an impact that would be remembered for a long time. And in the quiet halls of the academy, the lesson lingered. True talent often arrives humbly, quietly, and unexpectedly, but when it does, it leaves a mark that cannot be forgotten. The weeks that followed were transformative for the boy. The director had arranged for him to receive private lessons, access to better instruments, and opportunities to practice under the guidance of some of the academy's most skilled teachers. Each day, the boy arrived early and stayed late, absorbed in the music that had become the center of his life. Yet, despite the attention and support, he remained humble, focused only on improving, learning, and expressing himself through each note he played. Word of the boy's talent spread beyond the walls of the academy. Visitors came to watch him practice, and some even requested private performances. While many were impressed by his skill, the boy did not change. He did not seek praise or recognition. He simply played, letting the music speak for itself. His humility and dedication drew admiration from everyone he met, and slowly he became a symbol of inspiration for other students, showing them that true talent could shine quietly, without boasting or showmanship. One afternoon, the director called the boy to his office. He had a serious expression, but there was warmth in his eyes. I want to offer you an opportunity, he said. There is an upcoming academy concert, one of our most important events of the year. I want you to perform as the main pianist. The boy looked surprised but composed. Thank you, sir. I will do my best. This is more than a performance, the director continued. It will be in front of an audience that includes not only students and teachers but also music professionals and critics. This is your chance to show what you can do, not just to us, but to the world. The boy nodded. I understand, sir. I will prepare carefully. The weeks leading up to the concert were intense. The boy practiced tirelessly, refining his technique, learning to control his expression and mastering the emotional depth of the pieces he would perform. Every day, the director would observe him, sometimes offering advice, sometimes just watching quietly, fascinated by the boy's progress. He could see how much the boy had grown, not only as a musician, but as a person. There was a focus, a calm confidence, and an emotional understanding in his playing that inspired everyone who listened. The night of the concert finally arrived. The Academy's main hall was filled with people, the air buzzing with excitement and expectation. Students, teachers, and guests filled the seats. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room as the director stepped onto the stage to introduce the performers. As you know, the director began. Tonight we have an extraordinary student among us. A young pianist whose talent, dedication, and humility have impressed everyone at this academy. Please welcome him to the stage. The audience erupted into applause. The boy stepped forward calmly, carrying himself with quiet dignity. He bowed slightly to the audience, then sat at the grand piano, his hands resting gently on the keys. The hall fell silent, anticipation hanging thick in the air. The first notes were delicate, almost fragile, but as the piece progressed, they grew in confidence and emotion. The boy's fingers moved with precision, yet each note was infused with feeling. The music filled the hall, weaving a story that touched everyone listening. There was joy, sorrow, hope, and reflection, all expressed through his hands and the piano. The director watched from the side of the stage, unable to look away. He remembered the boy's first auditions, the skepticism he had felt, and the lessons he had learned about humility, perseverance, and true talent. Tonight, he realized, the boy would not only perform music, but also teach a lesson to everyone in the audience about dedication, courage, and the quiet power of sincerity. As the performance continued, the audience was captivated. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, mesmerized by the skill and emotion displayed on stage. Even the most experienced musicians in the audience were silently impressed. Recognizing the depth and maturity in the boy's playing, the piece reached its climax, a section filled with powerful chords and rapid passages. The boy's fingers flew across the keys, yet he remained composed, each movement precise and controlled. The audience could feel the intensity, the passion, and the mastery behind each note. There was no doubt now this was someone extraordinary, a true artist in the making. As the final notes echoed and faded, there was a moment of stunned silence. The audience held their breath, not ready to break the spell. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder, until the hall was filled with a thunderous ovation. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping, some wiping away tears. The boy, still calm, gave a small bow, acknowledging the audience's admiration without seeking it. The director stepped onto the stage, clapping along with the audience. When the applause finally subsided, he approached the boy and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have done something remarkable," he said, his voice filled with pride. "Not just playing beautifully, but inspiring everyone here. You have shown us what talent, dedication, and humility can achieve. I am honored to have witnessed your growth." The boy nodded quietly. "Thank you, sir. I only tried to play with honesty and heart." The director smiled. "And that is exactly why it is so powerful." After the concert, many students and teachers came forward to congratulate the boy. They praised his skill, his dedication, and his calm presence. Some asked how he practiced, how he learned pieces so quickly, and how he could play with such emotion. The boy answered each question with patience and humility, never boasting, always focusing on the music itself. That night, the boy returned home, exhausted but happy. He thought about the journey he had taken from the first audition, when he had faced doubt and mockery, to this moment, where he had performed in front of a large audience and earned genuine respect. He felt proud, not because of recognition, but because of the effort, dedication, and love for music that had brought him here. The director, too, reflected on the day. He realized that the boy had changed not only the audience, but also the academy and himself. He had learned an important lesson: never judge someone by appearances, assumptions, or preconceptions. True talent, dedication, And humility could be found in the most unexpected places, and when nurtured, they could inspire everyone around them. In the days and weeks that followed, the boy continued to practice and perform. He took on new challenges, learned more advanced pieces, and helped other students who were struggling with their own lessons. His presence brought a sense of calm and inspiration to the academy, and his story became a reminder to everyone that perseverance, humility, and love for what you do can overcome any obstacle. The director often watched him practice, silently proud. He would occasionally offer advice, but mostly he let the boy learn through experience. He had realized that guidance was important, but the boy's dedication and natural talent would always lead him further than anyone could predict. One afternoon, as the boy played a complex composition he had been struggling with, the director approached him quietly. "I have seen many students in my career," he said, "but few have taught me as much as you have. You have reminded me what music truly is, not just notes and technique, but expression, connection, and heart. Never lose that, and you will go far." The boy looked up, smiling faintly. "I will remember that, sir. Music is not about showing off or impressing others. It is about feeling, learning, and sharing." The director nodded. He knew that the boy's journey had only just begun. With the right opportunities, guidance, and continued dedication, he could become one of the greatest musicians the academy, or even the world, had ever seen. And so, the boy continued to grow, practice, and inspire. Each note he played carried the story of his journey, from quiet determination, through doubt and challenge, to recognition and respect. His music touched hearts, taught lessons, and reminded everyone who heard it that true talent is often quiet, humble, and unassuming, yet powerful enough to change lives. Years later, those who had witnessed the boy's early days at the academy would remember him not just for his skill, but for the humility, dedication, and love for music that defined him. The director, too, would always recall the lesson he had learned: never underestimate anyone. Because greatness often comes softly, waiting for the moment to reveal itself. The boy had arrived quietly, without fanfare, and in doing so, had left a mark that could never be forgotten. His story became an inspiration, a reminder that talent, combined with humility and perseverance, could overcome any obstacle, impress even the most skeptical, and leave a lasting impact on everyone who had the privilege to witness it. And in the quiet halls of the academy, the piano continued to sing under the boy's fingers, a testament to the journey, the dedication, and the power of music to touch hearts, change minds, and inspire greatness.